Kentucky versus Florida preview. Why the Gators will tame the Cats. Hey, everybody. Will Miles here from Read and Reaction, back with another article from the site, www.readandreaction.com. These things have gotten great receptions on YouTube, so we're going to keep recording them. We're going to keep putting them up there. And if you want them in print form, if you want to see any of the videos that are associated with these articles, you can head over to readandreaction.com and see them over there. If you'd like to support us further, there are a bunch of different ways you can do that. One way you can do that is by subscribing here on YouTube. You can also like the videos. That helps the algorithm, helps people pick it up. Other Gator fans, forward it to other Gator fans if you like it. Certainly, if you're on Twitter, you can retweet it. If you're on Facebook, you can like it and share it. And then if you really want to support us, you can go over to patreon.com/readandreaction. Help us out over there. For as little as $3, you can get a little bit of extra content from Nick and myself. And certainly we're going to be pumping some more of that out over there as the season progresses. So with that being said, thank you so much for your support. And let's get to the article, Kentucky versus Florida preview. Kentucky versus Florida is why it's so hard to win in the SEC. Florida comes off of an emotional 29-26 win over Utah and immediately has to turn around and play Kentucky, a team that beat Florida last year and is predicted by many, not me, to finish second in the SEC East. To have that sort of turnaround is tough physically, but even more demanding emotionally. Florida now knows that they can stand toe-to-toe with a high-quality team. In fact, if you look at the advanced stats, Florida should have won that game against Utah handily, which should give them confidence moving forward that they can get way better if they fix the myriad mistakes they made against the Utes. By comparison, Kentucky may be able to get up emotionally for this game in a way Florida can't. But the Wildcats also have no idea where they stand after a relatively uninspiring 37-13 win over Miami of Ohio. In fact, I'd wager that perhaps there is more doubt in Lexington about how good of a team they are than there was prior to the opener. The sportsbooks certainly have that doubt too, as the Gators are now, as of September 7th, 5.5-point favorites. So do they deserve to be? Or should the Gators be worried that Kentucky is going to be able to pull an upset in the swamp? There's no place like home. Kentucky quarterback Will Levis had a quarterback rating of 169.9 in the opener against Miami, which is just shy of elite territory. Last year, his quarterback rating was 148.3, so the opener indicates that he's taken a step forward, right? Well, that sort of statement requires a closer look at the data from last year, in particular, Levis's home and road splits. Levis was great last year in his home games, posting a yards above replacement, YAR, my proprietary stat for quarterback performance that takes running and throwing into account, of 1.39, which is very good, but not quite elite. That is confirmed by his QB rating of 167.1, indicating very good play, but not quite elite. He was able to reproduce almost the exact same stat line in the air against Miami of Ohio with a quarterback rating of 169.9. But his YAR for that game was only 0.34. That's because he had 7 rushes for minus 18 yards instead of averaging 3.5 yards per rush. This suggests to me that Levis might actually be taking a step backwards as he asked to do more within the offense. But the thing that these splits really point out to me is that having this game in the swamp is really an advantage for the Gators. Levis's quarterback rating on the road last year dropped 43.5 points to well below average. His YAR fell to negative 1.04, which is really poor quarterback play. He wasn't much better in the Wildcats' one neutral site game either. His 18-7 touchdown to interception ratio at home is great. His 6-to-6 touchdown to interception ratio away from home is abysmal. He was just a completely and totally different quarterback last year on the road, and he isn't going to experience an environment any tougher than the Swamp. Kentucky's running game. The Gators' weakness on defense is clearly on the ground. In 2020, Florida ranked 78th in yards per rush allowed, 4.6 yards per attempt. Last year, they were even worse, 85th. That doesn't appear to have changed too much, as the Gators surrendered 5.9 yards per rush against Utah and couldn't stop the Utes at all in the second half. However, Florida's defense ranked 85th in yards per pass attempt, 7.8 in 2020, but improved to 18th, 6.5 in 2021. That appears to have continued as well, as the Gators surrendered 6.8 yards per attempt to Cam Rising, someone being lauded as one of the best quarterbacks in the country coming into the game. That means it would behoove the Wildcats to get their running game going. The problem is that they don't have many running backs left with the suspension for DUI and something else of starter Chris Rodriguez, and injuries to FCS transfer Ramon Jefferson, torn ACL, and junior Juton McClain, week to week. That leaves the ageless Cavassier Smoke and freshman Lavelle Wright. Smoke is a super senior who has over 1,300 yards in his career, with an average of 5.6 yards per rush. He only has 10 catches in his career, though, so has yet to show a skill that would be very helpful against Florida's linebackers. Wright is a freshman who had 9 carries last year and 3 in the game against Miami of Ohio on Saturday. He averaged 13.1 yards per attempt last year, but that was likely in garbage time. He averaged 3.3 yards per rush on Saturday and caught 1 pass. Smoke is a good player. Wright may be an excellent player eventually. Neither of these guys should strike fear in the Gators, even with a defensive line that has struggled. Even if Rodriguez and Jefferson were around, I'm not sure Florida should be that scared of the Kentucky running game. After all, Miami of Ohio was worse than Florida against the run in 2021 based on EPA and similar in yards per attempt allowed. You would have expected Kentucky to take advantage up front against the Red Hawks in the same way you might against the Gators. Instead, Kentucky ran the ball 26 times for 50 yards, 1.9 yards per attempt. Even if you remove Levis from that ledger, you're still looking at an average of 3.6 yards per attempt. That isn't the Kentucky program that we've come to expect over the past few years. It also leads me to the next area of opportunity for the Gators. Kentucky's offensive line. The reason I was down on Kentucky coming into this year had very little to do with Levis. Though I'm not real high on the guy, I realize he has some ability and can make some plays. No, the reason I was down on Kentucky is because they went 5-1 last year in one-score games, and while its offensive line was elite when running the ball, top 4 in every Football Outsiders offensive line running stat other than power success rate, it was just average in pass protection. Sack rate, 6%, was 54th. Standard down sacks rate, 5.4%, was 67th, and passing down sack rate, 7.4%, was 53rd. Then, center Luke Fortner was drafted by the Jacksonville Jaguars in the 3rd round, and left tackle Darian Kennard was drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs in the 5th round. You have to go back to guard Larry Warford back in 2013 for a Kentucky offensive lineman to be drafted as high as Fortner. You have to go back to 1988, through Monty Dawson and Greg Kunkel, to find 2 Kentucky offensive linemen going in the same draft. The line played poorly against Miami of Ohio. In fact, if you look at Kentucky's depth chart, Stoops has already made an adjustment. He's listed Kenneth Horsey at left tackle, replacing redshirt freshman Davis Wohlbach. Horsey has been banged up and would have been the starter against the Red Hawks had he been able to go, but for a position group that requires continuity, this is an issue. That's particularly true when you look at the first half against Miami of Ohio and how Kentucky's offensive line performed. On this play, the Red Hawks just rushed 4 men. Wohlbach, 74, gets beat by Miami of Ohio linebacker Ty Wise, number 10. Wise transferred from Indiana, not exactly a football powerhouse, during the offseason and had 0 sacks in his career coming in. Or how about this play? Again, Wohlbach gets beat, but this time inside. The Red Hawks again send just 4 men, but this time run a stunt. There's clearly miscommunication on the offensive line, and defensive end Brian Ugwu, number 8, comes free for the sack. Ugwu is a transfer from Rutgers, and this was his first career game. But I don't want to give you the impression that Kentucky's offensive line struggles were all on Wohlbach. On this play, Miami of Ohio blitzes a 5th man in the form of linebacker Ryan McWood, number 35. Kentucky guard Yeager Burton, number 62, gets his initial block, but doesn't pass him off to the center to recover for the blitz. Essentially, bringing McWood overloaded the right side of the offensive line, and Kentucky couldn't adjust. As this relates to Florida, Patrick Toney has no doubt seen this on film. This screams for one of his simulated pressures where either Ventrell Miller or Amari Burney come on a blitz with Brenton Cox dropping back into coverage. If that creates confusion on the Kentucky offensive line, Levis isn't going to have a chance to get the ball out. Finally, I have one last example here that I think exemplifies Kentucky's offensive line struggles. Levis throws a touchdown pass here, but this is about as difficult a touchdown pass as you're ever going to see. Some of that is because the defensive lineman identified with the arrow immediately slips past right guard Jeremy Flax, number 77, right at the snap. That causes Levis to backpedal, and he has to throw an absolutely perfect pass for the score. In all honesty, this pass should be intercepted, or at least broken up. But perhaps more telling is that Kentucky has third down at the 1-yard line and is up 30-13. Yeah, the Red Hawks have 9 men in the box, and Levis has one-on-one on the outside. But the fact that they weren't trying to run the ball in at this point would be worrisome to me if I were a Wildcat fan. Gators special teams. Most of this analysis is focused on Kentucky, but Florida isn't without flaws. The Gators' average starting field position against Utah was 81.4 yards from scoring. Compare that to Utah's 67.3, and you start to see why the game was close, even though Florida won the advanced stats battle pretty handily. Much of that was due to multiple mistakes on special teams. The opening drive started at the Gators' 8-yard line after a holding penalty on Dante Zanders on the opening kickoff. That drive ended with the Montrell Johnson fumble, but that fumble came 64 yards into the drive. A good kickoff return, and Johnson may not have had the opportunity to fumble before scoring. That wasn't the only issue on kickoffs for Florida. Florida's second drive started with Xavier Henderson catching the kickoff at the 2-yard line and returning it to the 18. A fair catch would have put the Gators at the 25. 2 drives later, Florida was called for holding on a kickoff, Jordan Pouncey, after a Utah field goal, forcing the Gators to start at their own 11. On the next drive, Florida scored a touchdown on Anthony Richardson's big-time run, but the drive started at their own 21 after returning a kickoff. Florida also had some issues on punts. After getting pinned back deep due to the Pouncey holding penalty, Florida went 3 and out. Can't find the clip, but the Gators punt team ran straight up the right-hand side of the field, but the punt went to the left. The result was that Utah's punt returner got a running start and didn't have many defenders in front of him. Normally, you'd expect to net about 40 yards from a punt. That would have put Utah at midfield. Instead, the drive started at the Florida 38-yard line, and Utah was able to get into easy field goal range. I harp on special teams here for 2 reasons. One, field position is really, really important. The average expected points scored on drives started from Utah's position, 67.3 yards away, is 1.54 points. The average expected points scored on drives started from Florida's position, 81.4 yards away, is 0.66. The second reason is that Kentucky has shown excellence on special teams, both against Florida last season and last week against the Red Hawks. The Wildcats obviously won last year's tilt against Florida in large part to a blocked field goal returned for a touchdown. That trend continued as they blocked a punt that turned into a field goal, and then opened up the second half with a 100-yard kickoff return for a touchdown against Miami. Florida has some significant advantages in this game, but if they give up 10 points to Kentucky on special teams, it's going to be an uphill battle. Anthony Richardson development. Anthony Richardson was awesome against Utah and a huge reason the Gators won the game. But what seemed true while watching the game live is absolutely true when looking at the statistics. He barely ever threw left, and he didn't take any deep shots. Richardson went 2 for 4 for 14 yards going left, with only one pass going more than 10 yards in the air. He did take one deep shot, 20-plus yards down the middle, but it was incomplete on a poor pass to Dante Zanders. He was 4 of 6 for 40 yards in the center of the field, most of that to Ricky Pearsall. But where Richardson did his damage was to the right. There, he went 11 to 14 for 114 yards. Not only was his volume there, but his success was that direction as well. He had a 71% success rate, or 75% success rate to the right-hand side, 100% success rate to the middle for 11 to 20 yards. From 0 to 10, he had a 50% success rate down the middle and 83% to the right. Believe me, Kentucky has a more detailed chart than this, but it suggests a quarterback who's being given half-field reads and taking off running if the play isn't there. Part of that is the offensive play design, as Napier's goal is to get Richardson on the edge, rolling right, and then allowing him to pick from 3 different receivers who flooded that side of the field. But Kentucky is absolutely going to coach its defensive ends to stay home and force Richardson to stay in the pocket to beat them by reading the field. Richardson ran for 9.6 yards per rush against Utah after averaging 7.9 yards per rush last season. The Gators were really successful on offense last season when Emory Jones ran for similar averages. It was when he was shut down in the running game, and Kentucky was the first time that happened last year, that the offense bogged down. Last season, after Florida scored a touchdown to make the score 7-7, Kentucky shifted to a defensive setup with 3 down linemen and 2 linebackers lined up on the outside. They gave the Gators a few yards up the middle, but didn't allow Emory Jones to get to the edge. Once they forced Jones to throw the ball, they were able to bottle up the Gators' offense. Richardson is better than Jones, but if I were predicting what Kentucky was going to do, I'd say that this strategy is likely going to be deployed again to try to frustrate him. Prediction. There's a reason Florida is favored in this game. Some of it has to do with an impressive win over Utah. A lot of it has to do with confirmation that Anthony Richardson's ceiling is sky high. But a lot of it should have to do with the Gators being at home, how Kentucky fared on the road last season, and Will Levis having to carry the load. Levis had a completion percentage of 54.2 in high school, including 56.4% his senior season. He wasn't throwing down the field all that much either, as he averaged just 8.6 yards per attempt. As I've shown multiple times, these stats tend to say a lot about potential at the college level. Levis was exactly who we thought he'd be at Penn State, completing 59.8% of his throws for 6.3 yards per attempt. That took a jump in 2021 with Kentucky as he completed 66% of his throws for an 8.0 yards per attempt average. But quarterbacks rarely take 2 consecutive jumps. Levis has already had his jump. What we saw last year is likely what we're going to get again this year. That means a quarterback who is almost elite at home, but a bottom feeder on the road. And that's assuming that his offensive line isn't a sieve like it was against Miami of Ohio. The main reason I picked Florida over Kentucky in the SEC East was that the teams were basically equivalent when you looked at the offensive and defensive expected points added, EPA. Luck in one-score games was the differentiator. But Florida is better this year with Richardson at quarterback. They may be better at running back, too, with Montrell Johnson and the unveiling of Trevor Etienne. They're certainly better on defense without Todd Grantham, even if that's still not a great unit. Go look at Kentucky's history under Stoops. It's way better than it has been under just about anyone else. But he followed a 10-3 season in 2018 with an 8-5 record, 3-5 SEC, and then a 5-6 record, 4-6 SEC. He went 3-1 in one-score games in that 2018 season. That dropped to 2-2 in 2019 and 2-1 in 2020, but back up to 5-1 again last season. Essentially, this is an 8-win team with a quarterback who struggled mightily on the road. They're about to head into the most rabid road environment in all of college football, and they have to contain perhaps the most explosive quarterback in all of college football without their all-everything linebacker Josh Paschal, also gone to the NFL, who was able to keep Emory Jones in check last year. All offseason, Florida heard that they might be in danger of starting the season 0-2. Then they watched as the SEC media placed them 4th in the conference with Kentucky 2nd. Believe me, they saw that. They remember what it felt like to watch their season flush down the toilet after the loss to the Wildcats last year. And the second game of the year is too early to be emotionally exhausted with one big win. And all of that is auxiliary. The fact is that Florida is a better team than Kentucky at this stage. And on Saturday, they're going to show it. Florida, favored by 5.5, wins 34-10. Picks this year thus far, 1-0, 1-0 against the spread. Thanks so much for joining me here. Again, if you want to support us, if you like what we do and you want more of this, you can show us that you want more of this. I don't like promoting our stuff in terms of asking for money, but at the end of the day, that is the best way that we understand whether you like what we're doing. And so if you can go over there, patreon.com/readandreaction, throw a few dollars in the kitty, help us out, and let us know that you like what you see on the site, that you like what you see on the YouTube channel, and that you'd like to see more of it. And so, as we have more and more people supporting us, that's going to free us up to be able to do more and more content. And the plan is to do that as best we can. So again, looking forward to it. The Swamp was electric last week. I was there. Won't be there this week, much to the disappointment of my 7-year-old Max, who wants to be back in the stadium again. So I've got somebody who's as excited about the stuff as I am. But certainly, night game in the Swamp going to be a rough environment for Kentucky. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully everything that's been laid out here has been helpful to you, understanding what might happen, but also hopefully it comes to fruition, because obviously I have the Gators winning by 24. So we will see you next time. Thanks so much for tuning in to Read and Reaction the articles, and go Gators.